The airport terminal hummed with the usual rhythm of travel, rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, the faint aroma of coffee. But at gate 24B, that rhythm shattered. A passport hit the bottom of a trash bin. The sound was small, a papery thud, but it carried like thunder through the silence that followed. Amara Daniels froze. Her eyes widened as the woman behind the counter, Karen Holt, the gate agent with iron gray hair and a pinched mouth, folded her arms and said coldly, "Next passenger, please." For a second, Amara couldn't breathe. It felt like the air itself rejected her existence. Around her, people shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the bin and the young woman standing before it. The fluorescent lights above flickered, catching on the gold edge of Amara's earring, a tiny outline of Africa. She had worn it for luck. Now it felt like a reminder of everything she was being punished for. Her voice trembled at first. "Excuse me, you just threw away my passport." Karen didn't even look up. "It didn't look real," she said flatly, tapping her keyboard. "You'll need to step aside while we verify your documents." The pause before documents was heavy, deliberate, a verbal knife. Passengers behind Amara sighed impatiently. A man muttered, "Come on, some of us have flights to catch." Another woman glanced down at her phone, pretending not to see. Amara's hands shook, not from fear, but fury. She had worked years for this moment. Her ticket to Geneva wasn't just a flight, it was her story, her proof that a girl from Atlanta's South End could stand on the world stage. But here she was, humiliated at the gate, her identity tossed into trash can like a piece of paper that didn't matter. She swallowed hard. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Never let them decide who you are." And then, something inside her shifted. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and hit record. The red circle blinked on the screen. Her voice steadied. "Excuse me, everyone. I'm recording this for my safety, and for the truth. This gate agent just threw away my valid passport because she says it doesn't look real." Heads turned. Murmurs rippled. Someone gasped. Karen's face went pale. "You can't record in this area," she snapped, lunging forward to grab the phone. Amara stepped back. "You already took one thing that doesn't belong to you. You're not taking this." Her voice didn't rise, it cut through the air like glass. The gate area went still, the kind of silence that only happens when people realize they're witnessing something wrong. A man in a suit whispered to his wife, "She's right, that's not okay." Another passenger pulled out their own phone and started filming too. In less than a minute, what began as humiliation turned into resistance. Karen's tone shifted from superiority to panic. "Security," she called out. "Security to gate 24B." But Amara didn't flinch. She stood there, a young black woman, in a navy travel blazer and worn leather shoes, eyes burning not with rage but with resolve. "You can call whoever you want," she said softly. "I'm not moving until I get my passport back." A ripple of applause started somewhere near the back. Small, hesitant, then it grew. People began murmuring in agreement. One woman called out, "She deserves her passport." Karen's fingers trembled on the keyboard. The power she'd wielded seconds ago was crumbling in front of a crowd that suddenly refused to look away. The hum of the airport returned, but it wasn't normal anymore. It was charged, electric. Security arrived, two officers with calm expressions but uncertain eyes. They didn't know who to believe yet. One of them asked quietly, "Miss, can we see the video?" Amara lifted her phone without hesitation. The red recording light blinked steady and unbroken. For the first time that morning, Karen Holt looked uncertain, like she'd just realized she was no longer in control of the story. And as the crowd closed in, phones up, voices raised, truth spreading like wildfire, Amara felt something unexpected rise in her chest. Not anger, not fear, power, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't scream, it stands, the kind that knows justice begins not with shouting, but with showing. "I spent hours crafting this story for you. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please consider subscribing. It means more than you know." Hours before the airport chaos, Atlanta was still waking up. Golden light spilled through half-drawn curtains in a small apartment near Auburn Avenue, walls lined with law books, sticky notes, and a world map peppered with red pins marking every place Amara dreamed of visiting. She stood before her mirror, smoothing the creases on her navy travel blazer, her hands trembling with equal parts pride and disbelief. "This is it," she whispered to her reflection. "You're representing more than yourself today." On the dresser lay her passport, boarding pass, and a letter embossed with a United Nations Youth Summit seal, her official invitation to speak on justice and equality in modern systems. The irony would come later, but that morning, she was pure hope, the kind that only comes from years of struggle finally meeting opportunity. Amara Daniels, 23, had grown up in the kind of neighborhood most people drive through but never stop in. Her mother, Angela Daniels, worked double shifts as a nurse, raising Amara alone after her father died in a construction accident when she was 9. Angela believed education was both a sword and a shield. She used to say, "They can take your peace, baby, but never your purpose." Amara lived by those words. Through high school, she carried more books than friends. Through college, she worked as a teaching assistant, debating professors twice her age on systemic bias and equal rights. And last spring, when she won the Global Justice Essay Competition, she cried for an hour, not because she'd won, but because the world had finally decided to listen. Her essay had ended with one haunting line: "Justice isn't blind, she's been told to look away." That line had gone viral among law students and activists worldwide. It was what earned her the flight to Geneva. By 6 a.m. that morning, the Daniels apartment buzzed with nervous energy. Angela paced the kitchen, clutching a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Text me when you land," she said for the third time. "Mom, I will. And call me before you board. You know how I get." "Yes, ma'am." They both laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that carried too much love, the kind that hides fear. Angela hugged her tightly at the doorway, whispering, "Go make them see you." The taxi ride to the airport was quiet. The city rolled by shades of gray and gold. Amara scrolled through her phone, reading congratulatory messages from her classmates, her professors, even strangers online who said she inspired them. One message stood out: "Don't forget, the world doesn't always clap for change until it's forced to." She smiled faintly. She didn't know then how true those words would become. At the airport, everything seemed ordinary. Check-in went smoothly. Security smiled at her when she presented her summit badge. She stopped for coffee, posted a selfie captioned, "Geneva, here I come," representing every dream that started small. The likes started pouring in before she even reached her gate. Gate 24B. It was half an hour before boarding when she first saw Karen Holt, the gate agent with a crisp uniform and the air of authority that often comes with unchecked power. Karen's every movement was precise, mechanical, scanning, stamping, directing, the kind of woman who saw herself as the final gatekeeper to the skies. And when Amara approached, smiling politely, holding her neatly arranged documents, Karen's eyes flicked from her face to her passport, and something shifted behind them. It was subtle at first: the pause, the tight lips, the way her gaze lingered too long on the brown skin of the hand holding the passport. Then came the question, the one that never sounds like a question: "Where did you get this?" Amara blinked. "The State Department." Karen frowned. "No, I mean, how did you get this?" The emphasis stung. Amara tried to laugh it off. "Like everyone else, ma'am. I applied, waited 6 weeks, paid the fee." Karen didn't smile. She scanned the passport again, slowly, as if daring it to make a mistake. The line behind Amara grew restless. She could feel eyes on her back, impatient, annoyed. In moments like these, she always felt two battles at once, the one happening, and the one inside her, trying not to make things worse. And yet, beneath the surface of her calm, something old stirred: memories of being followed in a store, questioned at a scholarship interview, mistaken for staff at her own university event. Every moment of quiet injustice had led to this one. She had promised herself she would never again let silence be mistaken for submission. As Karen Holt's tone grew colder, as her gaze shifted from scrutiny to contempt, Amara felt it, that same invisible wall that still divides the world: power on one side, dignity on the other. She didn't know that within the hour, those walls would crumble, because injustice thrives on silence, and Amara Daniels was done being quiet. The boarding line had thinned. The air around gate 24B was thick with routine, the steady hum of departure announcements, wheels of carry-ons scraping the tile, and the faint hiss of espresso machines from the nearby cafe. But for Amara Daniels, time had slowed. She stood at the counter, watching Karen Holt frown at her passport like it was a problem instead of proof. "Ma'am, I just need you to check the name again," Amara said softly. "It's the same as on the ticket." "Amara Daniels." Karen sighed sharply. The sound wasn't exhaustion, it was irritation wrapped in authority. "Miss Daniels, I've done this job for 15 years. I know when something doesn't look right." She turned the passport over, scanning its pages with deliberate slowness. Amara kept her composure, her hands folded neatly over her boarding pass. She knew the tone, the kind that made you feel small for daring to exist. "I understand," Amara said, "but that's an official document. It's valid." Karen looked up, her lips curling in a half-smile that wasn't a smile. "We'll see about that." Then, In a single motion that would replay in Amara's mind for years, she tossed the passport into the trash can beside her desk. The soft sound it made, paper against plastic, was devastating. The moment stretched. A man waiting in line muttered, "What the hell?" Another woman clutched her boarding pass tighter, but no one moved. No one spoke. Amara's throat tightened. The humiliation burned hot in her chest, but her voice stayed level. "You just threw away my passport." Karen shrugged. "Then I suggest you step aside while we call verification." "Call who?" "Homeland Security. If you're really who you say you are, they'll sort it out." Each word was sharp enough to wound. For a moment, Amara felt like the child she once was, the one told to stop being dramatic when she spoke about unfair treatment, the one taught to stay polite even when it hurt. But then she remembered something her professor once told her: there's a difference between breaking the law and breaking silence. She took a slow breath, stepped closer, and said calmly, "You're making a mistake, and I'm not walking away from it." The passengers shifted uneasily. Some avoided eye contact, others watched in stunned discomfort. A young mother near the window whispered, "That's not right," but her voice faded under the tension. Karen, sensing the attention, raised her voice. "If you don't step aside, I'll have you removed from this gate." Amara looked her straight in the eye. "Then you'll have to explain why you threw away a valid U.S. passport." The crowd's silence deepened, a vacuum of disbelief, and then came the click. Amara hit record. Her phone camera faced Karen, steady despite her trembling hands. "This gate agent," she said, her tone clear and even, "just threw away my passport. She says it looks suspicious. I have my invitation to the United Nations Youth Summit right here. I'm recording this for my safety." Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. "Turn that off. You're not allowed to record me." "Why not?" Amara asked. "If you're doing nothing wrong." A ripple of whispers spread. Someone started filming from behind her. Another passenger muttered, "She's brave." The tension fractured into sides, those who watched silently and those who began to question authority aloud. "Let her on the plane," a man called out. "This is discrimination." Another shouted. Karen's authority was slipping. She slammed her hand on the counter. "Security. Gate 24B, now." But the moment security was called, Amara knew the truth. The story had already escaped Karen's control. Security arrived minutes later, two officers in Navy uniforms, calm but visibly cautious. The lead officer, Sergeant Lewis, approached carefully. "Ma'am, can you tell me what's happening here?" Karen spoke first, gesturing wildly. "This passenger presented a suspicious passport. I disposed of it for safety reasons." She's now recording and refusing to step aside. Amara didn't flinch. "You threw away my valid passport because you decided it didn't look real. I have all my documents, and everything is on video." The officer turned to Karen. "You disposed of her passport." Karen hesitated. "I followed procedure." "Which procedure is that?" he asked quietly. No answer. The crowd murmured louder now. Phones recorded from every angle. The truth was multiplying, unstoppable, undeniable. Amara reached down, retrieving the invitation letter from her bag. She held it out. "Here, you can call the number on this letter. They'll confirm who I am." Sergeant Lewis took it carefully. He glanced at the letterhead, his eyes widening slightly. "United Nations Youth Summit." "Yes," she said softly. "I'm supposed to speak there tomorrow." A silence followed, the kind that feels like justice shifting, ever so slightly. Karen's expression faltered. She could have printed that herself, but her voice no longer carried authority, it carried desperation. The officer nodded once, then crouched beside the trash bin. The sound of rustling plastic filled the air as he retrieved the passport. He brushed it off, opened it, examined the seal, the photo, the hologram. "This looks genuine," he said finally. Karen's face drained of color. "It's real," someone in the crowd asked. "Real," the officer confirmed. "Completely valid." A wave of murmurs swept through the gate. One passenger clapped quietly, then another joined. The applause grew, hesitant, then bold. Karen stood frozen. Her hands trembled as she stared at Amara, who now stood taller than she had all morning. "You owe her an apology," a woman's voice said from the crowd. Karen's jaw clenched. Her lips parted, but no words came. Amara didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply took her passport back, holding it to her chest like something sacred. "You tried to take my dignity," she said quietly, "but that doesn't fit in any trash can. What would you have done if this happened right in front of you? Would you speak up, or stay silent like most people did?" The boarding area slowly returned to motion, but something invisible had changed. The energy that once favored the uniformed gate agent now leaned toward the young woman who dared to stand her ground. Amara Daniels sat quietly near the window, the passport now resting safely in her lap. Her hands still trembled, but her heart had settled into rhythm, steady, determined. On her phone screen, the video recording blinked uploading. Wi-Fi connection. Hashtag Gate24B. Caption: when your passport is valid but your skin color makes people doubt it. Within minutes, it began. Notifications, comments, shares, like sparks catching dry grass, the story spread. Meanwhile, at the gate, Karen Holt paced behind the counter, her posture still stiff but her confidence cracked. The airline's operations manager, Mr. Daniel Rowe, a man in his early 40s with a clipped tone and eyes that missed nothing, arrived with two security officers. "What's going on here?" he asked, scanning the uneasy crowd. Karen straightened. "A misunderstanding, sir. The passenger's documents looked irregular, and you threw her passport away," Rowe interrupted, disbelief flashing across his face. Karen hesitated. "It was a safety judgment call." Rowe's voice lowered, dangerous in its calm. "Do you have the authority to discard a federal document?" No answer. He turned toward Amara, who was still seated nearby, her phone now buzzing non-stop. "Miss Daniels, may I speak with you?" She stood, composed but cautious. "Of course." They stepped aside, away from the crowd. "First, I want to personally apologize," Rowe said, his voice sincere but strained. "This is completely unacceptable. I'll make sure this is investigated immediately." Amara nodded slowly. "Apologies don't erase humiliation, Mr. Rowe, but accountability might." He exhaled, rubbing his temple. "You're right." By the time Amara boarded the next flight, now upgraded to first class, though the gesture felt hollow, the internet had already taken over the narrative. Within an hour, her video hit 200,000 views. By the time the plane left U.S. airspace, it had crossed 1.5 million. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere, people were talking. Amara Daniels Gate24B dignity in sky justice takes flight. Comment sections flooded with outrage and solidarity. How many times has this happened without cameras rolling? Her calm is stronger than any security badge. This is what systemic bias looks like. Quiet, casual, cruel. News outlets picked it up before Amara even landed in Geneva. Back in Atlanta, Angela Daniels watched the video on her phone, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She didn't cry at first. She didn't even move. She just watched her daughter's voice echo across millions of screens. "That's my baby," she whispered. "That's my baby telling the truth." Her phone rang nonstop. Friends, journalists, even civil rights lawyers offering to represent Amara pro bono. At the same time, inside the airline's regional headquarters, chaos reigned. Conference rooms filled with executives. Screens played the viral clip on loop. "Who approved that agent's training record? We need a statement, now." Damage control won't work if the footage shows clear misconduct, and it did. The video was damning, not edited, not exaggerated, just truth, raw and simple. Karen Holt, once the untouchable authority behind her desk, was suddenly suspended pending investigation. Her employee ID was deactivated before noon. For the first time in 15 years, she had to walk through the same terminal she once ruled, but now through whispers and cameras aimed at her. The power had shifted. On board, Amara sat by the window, watching clouds drift beneath her. The hum of the engines was oddly soothing, like the calm after surviving a storm. She replayed the moment in her head, the trash can, the laughter, the silence of those who didn't speak up. It could have gone differently, she knew that. It always could, but something in her heart told her that maybe, this time, it wasn't just about her. She turned on airplane mode, leaned back, and closed her eyes. Hours later, her plane touched down in Geneva. As she stepped through customs, journalists were already waiting. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Daniels, how does it feel to stand up against discrimination on such a global stage? Did you ever imagine your video would reach millions? Do you plan to take legal action against the airline?" Amara smiled politely, though fatigue softened her eyes. "Right now, I'm just focused on why I came here, to speak about justice. What happened to me is part of that story." Inside the marble hall of the United Nations Youth Summit, Amara stood before delegates from over 50 countries. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was here to speak about equality, and the universe had handed her a living example of why it still mattered. Her speech began softly. "Yesterday, I was reminded that injustice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers through uniforms and procedure. It hides behind smiles and policies. But justice, real justice, begins when one person decides to stop pretending not to see." Her words echoed through the hall. Some delegates nodded, others blinked away tears. Outside the conference livestream, millions watched. The comments rolled in like waves. This woman is changing the narrative. She turned humiliation into history. Power listens only when truth gets loud enough. Meanwhile, Karen Holt sat alone in her apartment, blinds drawn. The world she'd controlled for years had collapsed into silence. Her face was everywhere: memes, think pieces, public statements. She scrolled through comments with trembling hands. Racist gate agent suspended. The cost of arrogance. Karen Holt, the face of accountability. She closed her laptop, heart pounding. For the first time, she felt what Amara must have felt that morning: powerless. And in that stillness, shame began to take root. The sun had barely risen when the world began calling. Amara woke to hundreds of notifications, major news outlets, interview requests, hashtags trending across continents. Her name was now a symbol of dignity, and her calm defiance had become a movement. But beneath the attention, she still felt the ache, the raw reminder of that moment when her worth had been questioned for no reason other than who she was. She scrolled through her phone, pausing on one headline that read, "Young Black Scholar Challenges Airline's Bias." With just her phone, the article described her as the woman who stood without shouting. She smiled faintly at that, because that's exactly what she'd done. At the same time, across the Atlantic, the airline's headquarters was under siege, not by protesters in the streets, but by the far more unforgiving court of public opinion. News anchors replayed the clip every hour. Analysts debated corporate accountability. The company's stock price began to slip, and shareholders demanded answers. Inside a high-rise boardroom in New York, executives gathered around a long glass table. "We can't ignore this," said one vice president, his tie loosened from hours of stress. "We need a public statement," another insisted. "Something human, not legal." The CEO, a composed woman in her 50s, tapped her pen against the table. "Find out everything," she said. "The full incident report, the employee's history, and what it will take to make this right." Meanwhile, Karen Holt sat in a quiet office at the regional branch, not as an employee, but as a subject of investigation. Her badge was gone, her uniform, folded neatly in a box. Across from her sat two company investigators and a representative from HR. "Ms. Holt," one began, "the footage clearly shows you discarding the passenger's passport. Can you explain your reasoning?" Karen's voice cracked. "It looked fake. I was following instinct." "Instinct," the investigator repeated flatly, "not protocol." She hesitated. "No, but I've seen forged documents before." "The document was genuine," he cut in. "You humiliated a passenger in public, violated federal handling procedures, and misrepresented the airline's values." Silence. Karen's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." "Intent doesn't erase impact," the HR rep said gently. Those words struck harder than any punishment. For the first time in her career, Karen realized that the power she'd carried so easily, the badge, the authority, the confidence, was never hers by right. It had been trust, loaned to her by the company, by society. And now, that trust was gone. 2 days later, a press conference was called. Rows of cameras, flashing lights, microphones waiting for words that might heal what pride had broken. The CEO stepped to the podium, her tone firm but remorseful. "We deeply regret the incident involving passenger Amara Daniels. The behavior displayed at Gate 24B does not reflect our values or training standards. The employee responsible has been terminated effective immediately. We are implementing mandatory cultural sensitivity training across all departments, beginning this week." Reporters fired questions. Will the airline compensate Ms. Daniels? Are criminal charges being considered? Is this part of a wider pattern of discrimination? The CEO paused. "We are working directly with Ms. Daniels to ensure accountability and restoration. What happened was unacceptable, and we will not ignore it." The feed streamed live. Within minutes, headlines flashed across the globe. "Airline terminates agent after viral incident. Company apologizes to young activist who stood her ground." In Geneva, Amara watched the press conference from her hotel room. Her hands trembled, not from anger this time, but from the weight of vindication. Her mother called seconds later. "They fired her, baby," Angela said, voice cracking with emotion. "You did it." Amara exhaled slowly. "No, Mom, we did it." Everyone who spoke up, everyone who refused to look away. There was a long pause. Then her mother whispered, "I'm proud of you, but I'm prouder of how you carried yourself." Later that evening, Amara was invited onto an international news program. The host, a respected journalist, leaned forward with genuine admiration. "You've become a global symbol of grace under pressure. But tell us, what was going through your mind in that moment?" Amara smiled softly. Honestly, I was terrified, but I knew if I stayed silent, I'd be teaching the wrong lesson, that it's okay to be treated as less than human. Do you forgive the gate agent? The host asked gently. The question hung heavy in the air. Amara took a breath. Forgiveness isn't about excusing the act, it's about freeing yourself from the poison of it. So yes, I forgive her, but I'll never forget what it taught me. The audience applauded quietly, the kind of applause that comes not from entertainment, but from respect. That night, Amara scrolled through her messages again, thousands from around the world, but one stood out. It was from a young flight attendant in training. Because of you, I'm learning to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. You reminded me that dignity has no uniform. She smiled through tears. Maybe that was the real victory, not the firing, not the headlines, but the awakening. Meanwhile, Karen Holt watched the same interview from her darkened apartment. Her hands gripped her coffee cup tightly, her eyes rimmed red. On screen, Amara spoke calmly. No hate, no anger, just truth. For the first time, Karen felt something she hadn't felt in years: remorse. She reached for her laptop and began typing a message, one she wasn't sure she'd ever send. Ms. Daniels, I can't undo what I did, but I've spent my life thinking rules made me right. I see now that respect is more powerful than authority. I'm sorry. She hesitated, staring at the blinking cursor. Then she pressed send. Hours later, Amara opened the message. She read it twice, then set her phone down, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She whispered into the quiet room. The world had watched, judged, and spoken. In less than a week, Amara Daniels had gone from an ordinary traveler to a symbol of modern justice, not because she shouted, but because she stood still when the world expected her to shrink. Across airports, offices, and classrooms, her name had become a quiet lesson whispered between coworkers, posted on bulletin boards, and discussed in sensitivity trainings. But for Amara, the noise of fame wasn't the victory, the change was. 3 days after the airline's press conference, she received an official invitation to meet with the company's leadership team. The letter was written in careful corporate language, but its final line caught her attention. We are not just here to apologize, we are here to learn. She hesitated before accepting, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to face them on her terms, as an equal, not as a victim. When the day came, Amara walked through the same terminal where everything had started. This time, people recognized her. Some smiled nervously, others whispered words of encouragement. The sound of rolling luggage mixed with faint murmurs. That's her, the girl from the video. The air felt lighter, but her heart still beat with that memory, the sting of humiliation, the weight of a gaze that once made her feel small. As she approached the meeting room, the company's PR director met her at the door, hands clasped respectfully. Ms. Daniels, he said softly, thank you for coming. The CEO is inside. The room was modern, glass walls, polished floors, a skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, but beneath the shine was tension, humility, and a strange silence that demanded truth. The CEO rose as Amara entered. No bodyguards, no podium, just a human being meeting another human being. Amara, she began, there are no words that can undo what happened, but I need to say this, I'm sorry, not as an executive, but as a person who's part of a system that should have protected you, and failed. Amara nodded slowly. Thank you. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted respect, not just for me, but for everyone who's been made to feel invisible. The CEO's eyes softened. Then help us make that change. The screen fades into a montage, Amara leading a workshop with new gate agents, explaining unconscious bias and passenger dignity, training sessions across airports, employees watching the viral video not as punishment, but as education. A new company policy rolled out, the Daniels Initiative, mandating body cams for gate disputes and independent review boards for passenger complaints. Amara speaking at universities and conferences, her calm voice echoing over applause. Her story had moved from shame to system, from moment to movement. But justice doesn't just restore balance, it exposes what was broken. Behind the scenes, Karen Holt's apology email made its way through corporate channels. The company confirmed her termination, but Amara quietly requested one thing, that Holt be offered a place in the very same sensitivity training program, not to work, but to learn. It was an unexpected gesture. When asked why, Amara simply said, change means nothing if the ones who caused the harm never see what they broke. And so, weeks later, Karen attended the session anonymously. She listened as Amara's voice, calm, compassionate, played in a recorded segment about empathy and justice. Tears welled in her eyes. She took notes furiously, as if trying to write her way out of regret. For the first time, she understood that power without reflection was just permission to harm. Meanwhile, Amara's viral video continued to ripple beyond borders. Government officials praised her composure. Civil rights groups invited her to collaborate on a campaign called Dignity in Transit, pushing for global airline accountability standards. Her name became a petition, then a policy. She didn't plan to become an activist, but sometimes, justice finds its own messengers. Months passed. The Geneva Youth Summit ended in triumph. Amara's keynote speech drew a standing ovation, but her favorite moment wasn't on stage. It was when a teenage girl approached her afterward, clutching a passport to her chest. "I almost didn't come," the girl said nervously. "I was scared I'd be treated like you were, but then I watched your video, and I decided I'd never hide who I am again." Amara smiled, tears brimming. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to walk tall." As her plane back to the U.S. prepared for takeoff, she looked out the window. The same sound of engines that once carried humiliation now carried pride. The same uniformed attendants who once doubted her now treated her like a guest of honor. When the captain's voice came through the intercom, it was steady and warm. "Ladies and gentlemen, a special welcome to Ms. Amara Daniels. Thank you for reminding us what grace looks like in the face of injustice." The passengers erupted in gentle applause. Amara looked down, smiling through quiet tears. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about faith. Faith that humanity could still learn, even when it stumbled. What's your idea of real justice, punishment, or change? Would you have done what Amara did if no one was watching? Months passed. The world kept moving. Flights took off. Gates reopened. Lives continued. But for two women, the events of Gate 24B never truly ended. They lived in its echoes, one as a reminder, the other as a lesson. Amara Daniels had returned to her life in Atlanta, but nothing felt the same. The law degree on her wall, once a symbol of achievement, now felt like a promise she was just beginning to fulfill. She had turned her experience into purpose, traveling to universities, community centers, and even airline headquarters across the world, teaching the power of composure, self-worth, and accountability. Her story wasn't about anger anymore, it was about alignment, how to stay true to your values even when power tries to strip them away. One afternoon, while preparing for a speech at a justice forum, Amara found herself rewatching her own video, the one that had changed everything. She watched the moment she spoke up, the stillness in her eyes, the disbelief in the faces around her. For the first time, she didn't see humiliation. She saw strength. She saw the precise second she decided to stop asking for respect and start demanding it, not with rage, but with reason. Meanwhile, in a small town just outside Denver, Karen Holt was rebuilding. After losing her job, she took a step most wouldn't have expected. She volunteered at a local community center that helped retrain workers who'd faced public scandal or job loss. She spoke little about what happened, but everyone knew. And strangely, they respected her honesty. Karen spent months reading books on race, privilege, and power. She attended diversity workshops, not because she had to, but because she needed to. Her humility didn't erase her mistake, but it transformed her into someone who finally understood why it had mattered so deeply. One cold morning, Karen received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. Amara Daniels. Her heart raced as she opened it. "Dear Karen, I wanted to thank you for your message months ago. I know how hard it is to face what we've done wrong in front of the world, but I believe redemption is not found in the moment you fall, it's in the moment you choose to rise. If my story helped even one person look deeper instead of judging faster, then everything that happened was worth it. Wishing you peace, Amara." Karen sat quietly for a long time, the letter trembling in her hands. For the first time in months, she smiled, not out of joy, but out of release. Amara speaking on an international stage, saying, "True justice isn't when someone loses a job, it's when a system learns a lesson." A news clip showing the airline's new diversity initiative named the Amara Code. Karen standing in a classroom, sharing her story with trainee customer service agents. Power isn't in how loud your voice is, it's in how you use it to make someone feel seen. A young girl watching Amara's viral video on her phone, whispering to her mother, "She looks like me." The two women, Amara and Karen, never meeting again, yet connected forever by a single act that reshaped them both. Justice doesn't always come with applause or headlines. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, when a heart changes, when a system corrects itself, when an old wound becomes a lesson instead of a scar. What happened at Gate 24B began as humiliation, but it ended as transformation. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can expose the deepest flaw in power, and when power is forced to look in the mirror, it finally remembers what humanity looks like. Amara's story isn't just about race or travel or authority, it's about what happens when truth refuses to be thrown away, because a passport can be replaced, but dignity, once discarded, must be reclaimed, not by anger, but by courage. And if this story reminded you that standing tall can change more than your own life, please share it. Stories like this don't just deserve to be told, they deserve to be remembered.